So I did a little research comparing income tax rates in Canada and the United States. In both our countries, the philosophy is that income tax rates should be progressive. That means that as your income increases, you move up into higher tax brackets. That's the way it's supposed to work. But as we shall see, there are some glaring exceptions. So here are the rates for Canada for 2022, and here are the rates for the United States. Two things stand out for me about both systems. First is how few brackets there are, and secondly, how low the top brackets are. In Canada, once you reach $221,708 of income, you're in the top bracket, which is 33%. In the US, you reach the top bracket with an income of $539,900, and that bracket is 37%. In an era of multi-billionaires, why such low top ends? It didn't used to be this way. In Canada, the 1948 Income Tax Act had 10 brackets and the top one was 84%. And the difference between years ago and now is even greater in the United States, as shown in this table. In 1944 and 45, the top rate was 94%, and it applied to all income in excess of $200,000. That's equivalent to about $3.3 million today. For every year between 1951 and 1963, except for 52 and 53, the top rate was 91%, and for 52 and 53, it was 92%. 8 years of this stretch were during the presidency of Dwight D. Eisenhower, a Republican. From the perspective of the highest office in the land, Eisenhower obviously thought that a top tax rate of 91% was justified because he did not change it during the 8 years of his presidency. And remember, he was a Republican. Some people look back on the 50s with nostalgia as a golden era of prosperity and possibility. And it's true, a large prosperous middle class did emerge during this decade. It wasn't always so great for women, who were often told to stay home, keep house, and make babies. But it was a time when most men, as single wage earners, could support their families well enough to buy a house, a car, and a college education for their children. Or at least they had the possibility of that. It is essential to recognize how much of the prosperity of the 50s was created by government spending, as they took the revenue generated from high taxes on the very highest incomes and invested it in infrastructure like highways, airports, and energy projects, and also in guaranteeing residential mortgages. This led to a huge surge in home construction to house the rapidly growing population that was booming in the post-war period. All of these investments in the public good were made possible by the tax system that existed at the time. So how did the elimination of the top tax brackets come about? It results from unrelenting pressure in both our countries from the wealthiest to have their taxes reduced as much as possible. And governments in both countries have given in again and again to this pressure. But the elimination of the top tax brackets is probably the least scandalous thing that has happened to taxes in our two countries since the Second World War. Much more outrageous, in my opinion, is the way governments, responding to pressure from their billionaire donors, have introduced all manner of tax loopholes that allow extremely wealthy people, the wealthiest of all, in fact, to pay little or no income tax at all. It's called tax avoidance, and it is widely practiced by the rich, and it is legal. Please look at the 3 short videos in the How They Do It section of the resource document you can download from the Get Informed page. Thanks to a patriotic, civic-minded employee at the Internal Revenue Service, we can now see just how shocking tax avoidance has become in the United States. Someone there leaked a huge treasure trove of confidential tax information to ProPublica, the award-winning investigative news organization. The leak shows that Jeff Bezos, estimated by Forbes to be worth $171 billion, paid not a penny in personal income taxes in 2007 and 2011. And Elon Musk, the richest man in the world at the time, worth an estimated $219 billion, paid nothing in 2018. This is nuts, and it's only the tip of the iceberg. ProPublica did a study of the 25 wealthiest Americans to see how much tax they paid in relation to the estimated growth of their wealth between 2014 and 2018. Forbes estimates that these 25 individuals' fortunes increased by $401 billion over these 5 years. And the tax documents show that during this time, they paid only $13.6 billion in taxes. That makes their tax rate just 3.4% on $401 billion in increased wealth. And the Grand Master, the wizard of tax avoidance was, sadly, Warren Buffett. And I say sadly because as billionaires go, I think he's one of the good guys. He's given away over $48 billion of his own fortune, and he's encouraged other billionaires to sign on to a pledge to give away half of their wealth as well. And he has even advocated higher taxes on the rich. But he too will do whatever the existing tax laws will allow to pay the minimum amount of tax. And what he has accomplished is truly, truly impressive. Forbes estimates that his wealth increased by $24.3 billion over this 5 years. And do you know what his tax rate was on that? 1/10 of 1%. 1/10 of 1% on $24.3 billion in increased wealth. How much money do you make, and what's your tax rate? There can be no more dramatic proof than this as to just how screwed up the American tax system has become, and how it viciously exploits ordinary people whose incomes come from wages and salaries, than the fact that Buffett was able to do this legally. And I know we have exactly the same problems in Canada, but we've never had a whistleblower at the Canada Revenue Agency to provide us with such dramatic specific examples. The ability of multi-billionaires to escape any kind of meaningful taxation on their incomes and their wealth has become so egregious, and it is so damaging to the social fabric in both our countries, that something must be done about it. And you have a role to play. Before I conclude, I want to tell you about one more significant change in our tax systems that the wealthy have engineered over the last decades. And that is a huge shift of the tax burden away from the companies that they own onto you and me, individuals. In Canada, in 1952, the government raised approximately equal amounts of money from corporate taxes and personal income taxes. By 2015-2016, for every dollar that corporations paid in taxes, citizens paid $3.50. Changes in the US are similar. There, the corporate share of federal tax revenue has dropped by 2/3 in 60 years, from 32% in 1952 to 10% in 2013. I'm not nostalgic for the 50s, but there is one aspect of that time that I would love to return to, and that's the income tax system that we had then, before all the loopholes that allow billionaires to pay little or nothing in tax. Just imagine what would become possible if the rich paid taxes now the way they did in the 1950s. Thousands of billions of dollars would become available to invest in fixing all the social and environmental problems that plague us. Just for openers, we could end homelessness. Imagine what that would feel like. You're probably not homeless, but I'll bet you're affected by it. Every time you see a homeless person on the street, you probably have an emotional reaction, and chances are it's not a really positive one. What if that problem didn't exist? What if you never again saw a homeless person on the street because there aren't any? Everybody has housing, including those with complex needs, and anyone who wants to escape from addiction has easy access to all the supports that will allow them to do that. How much better would your life be if the scourge of homelessness and public addiction didn't exist? How much better would your life be if all the daily reminders that we live in an incredibly unfair society were gone? Soup kitchens, food banks, and homeless shelters, all gone because the problems they were set up to serve no longer exist. How much better would your life be if crime was hugely reduced because youth at risk are diverted into life-affirming programs and a guaranteed basic income has eliminated all the petty crime that was driven by poverty and desperation? How much better would your life be if you knew that your children had access to unlimited free education, higher education, so that they could soar as high as their dreams and their abilities will allow? How much better would your life be if you knew that all those environmental problems that you don't even want to think about because it's so distressing are now being addressed effectively on the scale that matters. All our social and environmental problems can be fixed if we invest in proven solutions the way we invested in the public good during the 1950s. It's going to take a lot of money because a lot of big problems have been allowed to fester for a long time. The good news is there is a lot of money to be had. Where will we get it? From the obvious place, of course. From those who have so much more of it than they can ever reasonably use, and who could never have amassed such an obscenely large fortune in the first place if the tax system had not already been so thoroughly corrupted during the time when they were accumulating theirs. There, I said it. The unspeakable. I don't know exactly how we should cope with our tax system. I leave that to people who have studied it, and there is a lot of expertise in the nonprofit sector, including in the groups that are listed on this site. Please check out the ones that I'm linked to. Fair taxation is a nonpartisan issue, and pursuing greater fairness could actually help reduce polarization and bridge political divides. It doesn't matter if you are white collar or blue collar, if you're making minimum wage or $500,000 a year. If you earn your living from a wage or a salary, you have much more in common with wage and salary earners who support different political parties than you do with the billionaires who support yours. Tax fairness is an issue where wage and salary earners of every political stripe can come together and make common cause. It doesn't matter in Canada if you support Trudeau or Poilievre or Singh, or in the States if it's AOC or Bernie Sanders or Donald Trump. Regardless of who you support, you all have a powerful financial incentive to come together and cooperate with each other to make a more fair tax system. Because right now, you're all getting screwed equally by the one that we've got. Our tax systems have become so unfair because our politicians have responded to pressure from people who benefit from that unfairness. If we want things to change, we have to get them to respond to pressure from us. The billionaires have lots of lobbying money, but citizens have votes, and votes count. We have to let our politicians know that we demand significant tax reform to make the economic system more fair, and we will not be satisfied with tinkering around the edges. My hope is that Fairness Friday's protest parties, in addition to being fun, remember that? They got to be fun, that's important, that they will become an important vehicle for people committed to this issue to network, strategize, and plan future campaigns. We can bring about greater economic fairness. Let's do it. Yeah!